So in this tutorial, I'm going to go over creating these PS5 controller renders, something I've had my eye on doing for a few months now. I create these renders over the course of the last week. I can flick through these here and you can see them. And I'm mainly kind of going to concentrate on the detail of the texture in the controller here, not so much the lighting. I think the lighting is a pretty minimalistic approach and there's only really one key light. And I kind of want to show you a more uncut process of me creating these renders to see how that performs. There's always kind of those people that are saying, oh, you could make this tutorial could have been 10 minutes long, but I want to kind of stretch this out and kind of lean into my natural workflow a little bit more and let you monitor that, because there might be a little bit more to extract rather than me forging a path for you to follow that may miss things out. So I'm not going to do the modeling again because I kind of suck at it and I don't have time to model a controller for a tutorial. But I will go over creating the render. So if you want to follow along with whatever model you have that is of a similar kind of genre, whether it's an Xbox controller or a console itself, or it could be something retro, it's all going to kind of, at least in the last kind of realm of the last 15 years, is kind of going to carry the same texturing and lighting tone, probably more so kind of in the last 10 years or so in realm of products. So you can see some of the renders I've done here, and it's mainly Octane noises that we're going to be using to kind of get that level of detail in these bits and on here. It's a lot of fun to do that on the analog sticks. Actually, it suits really well. And even I'm trying to find that angle so here you can see I even created the texture of the shapes on the back plate, which it has on the actual controller, which is awesome. And you can of course see in my viewport here, I was just doing there's me getting carried away with Houdini, but we're not going over that. I did some renders on the dark as well, because I saw a lot of things online bit of noise there, that's not good. I saw a lot of things online of people speaking about how cool the dark controller would look, and I'd be ashamed not to do that. And I actually tried breaking up the tone between the front and the back because, well, it's not a real product yet, so you can kind of get a little bit carried away with it. And I tried a slightly darker blue here too, which I think is a little bit more on brand. And with these Houdini simulations, I was just kind of doing some brand play with the colors. I thought it looked quite cool, and then this was just me messing around, and again more brand stuff, but we're not going into that. And just like last week's tutorial, I will have a reference board, a Notion board that I've made. I've not finished this yet, but I'll pop the black controllers on there and my own renders. And if you guys do some awesome renders, whether it's Xbox controllers or PS4, whatever it is, PS1, I really want to try some retro type game consoles with this kind of style. Send them over and I'll pop them on this reference board because it's great for everyone to benefit from this. So we'll get started here, and just to kind of show you the approach I'm going to take, I'm going to wipe my materials completely, and we can just kind of start from the ground up and create everything, because the only external texture I really used, I did use a couple surface imperfections, but I ended up taking them out because, again, you want that clean look. You don't always want the surface looking all banged and dirty. So the only external texture we used was the shapes I made in Photoshop, which is super easy. Just make a couple shapes, duplicate them a bunch of times, make it white and black, and then you put it in the bump map. But either way, everything, including the Houdini simulations, the alembics, will be on the store. So if you want to check out the project files, you can do. Although I will have two separate files, so you're not, because some of the alembics were just like a horrendous size. So you don't have to download them if you don't want to. And also, I wouldn't suggest trying to use them unless you have a powerful PC, because they're just not nice to work with in cinema. Anyway, what are we going to start with? So I have the controller set up. I have my selection tags kind of done. I would suggest looking closely at whatever model you're using and understanding the kind of way that the selections are holding themselves, because it's vital to look at this and understand that this part is glossy and this part is more rough. And you can see that on these renders here. And sometimes, although it may seem obvious, it can be a little difficult to spot this and then to take note of what material the kind of plastic ring is in here. And also kind of the differentiation between the sides of the triggers and bumpers and the top. Again, it's not just one static material. And then again, the same thing with the shapes here compared to the noise, although from back here it just looks like noise as well. So what we'll do is we'll just open up Octane, because most of this is going to be done in Octane. We can probably leave or should I set up the lighting first? I'll lay out a couple textures and then we can, or should we move into the lighting first? No, let's do the lighting first, because I sometimes kind of feel like if you try to texture without lighting, you can just be missing things and not seeing it properly. So we'll kind of scene direct this first on this just matte controller, and then bring it back to bring the rest of the tutorial background to the texturing, and whatever kind of nuggets of information I can give you in the rest of that, I will. So yeah, we'll get straight into that more kind of uncut tutorial. I want to see how this goes, because if it goes well, I'd like to do it more and be a bit more relaxed about kind of the creation process. And I also think a lot of you may want that more. So when it comes to products, I'm just going to kind of elaborate a little bit here on focal length. The lower you put your focal length, the bigger the product's going to look. And I'm going to demonstrate this for a second by coming up here, going to 25mm, and then duplicating it. I'll store render buffer, go into the second camera, do 135, come back. And then if you look here, this is your 25mm. It looks very long, very big. And then this is your new camera. And, well, it's pretty cool. The difference between the two, both kind of have their uses. This one is cool, I guess, but I'm more of this type, and I think it looks cleaner. I think it holds something in a composition much better than this. And I think unless you're, you've got to remember the size of this. Controllers aren't big objects. I wouldn't really suggest using a focal length like that. If you want to, you totally can, but I'm not gonna. I just think usually people that are new to cinema can have a tendency to not understand that you can change this, and you can write in whatever value you want. You can go to 5 if you want, and then do that. But yeah, I think it's useful to understand how to change that, and it's even more useful to understand these down here and going into isometric views and stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to zero out our rotations, and we're going to zero out the first two parameters there. And we should be looking at the controller front on. And if you come up here to filter, or this will be view on older versions of cinema, I'm going to turn off the world axis because it annoys me. Just like axis effects, dude annoys me constantly. Can't stand him. And then what you can do is just turn this to path tracing and lock your live viewer. And now we're in a pretty good position to set up some lighting. So I'm going to run over the lighting pretty quickly because it wasn't really that difficult. So if you drop in an Octane area light, and we'll drop in a texture environment. If you shove the texture environment to black, because currently this is on primary, so it's going to affect your shadows. So if you want less dark shadows, you bring that up. Although it will change your background until we add in our own background. So under details on the Octane light, just do a 50 by 50 and get a relatively small light. And then in the Octane area light tag, go to distribution and add in a fall off map, and go into it and just change it to 90 degrees under the mode, and bump this to 10,000. And then right click animation. This will be Cinema 4D tags if you're on an older version of Cinema, and grab a target and just make it point at the controller. And then what we're going to do is press F2, camera's perspective. If I am going quite fast here, it's because I've kind of done this a million times in tutorials, and I know there's always someone new in each tutorial, but my apologies if I'm going too quick. So what you kind of want to do is just punch this light up to a kind of 3/4 degree angle up there, and have it looking down, and don't have your shadows too long out to the side, but maybe something like this. And then you can kind of start bringing this back close to home again, and we'll sort out the shadow in a second. But this was generally all I did for the light. You can maybe bring it a little bit closer, and if you add a Octane camera tag here and just turn on your highlight compression, you can kind of see the difference here on this hotspot, which will just kind of get us away with bringing the light a bit closer and giving us some punchier lighting. And then the next thing this does fall under lighting, funnily enough, is if we drop in a plane, and we maybe do 6,000 by 6,000 to give us a bit of breathing room. Your plane's going to affect, it's going to bounce light back up. Not so much if you're on direct lighting, but on path tracing, it's going to take the light from the Octane light that's coming down, and it's going to go back up to the controller. So that's lighting. So if you just press F2 again there, and holding Shift, hit this, and then reselect your plane, and holding Alt, hit this, and under here you can just put in to 90 degrees and rotate it once that way, rotate it again that way, and then I'm just going to bring that back, bring up the size of it, and if you bring down the first parameter there, you can just kind of get rid of that sharpness, although I am going to get a pretty tight turn here. I just think it looks better. And that's going to kind of finish off our lighting, put it in a nice spot. Of course we get the lights, the light bouncing off at every angle, which looks very nice. So I'm just going to drop this down a little bit, push it back a little bit, and bring it up because I quite like that shadow, but I just don't want it too close. And you can just rename this BG and group all these together and call it scene. That was Alt G to group the items, so you can keep grouping stuff here if you want to. So that was scene. So we're not probably really going to dip back in here now. I'm probably going to leave that for the lighting. I may have used a HDRI, but I don't really remember doing it. So we're probably going to stick with that, and we'll maybe put on some bloom, just a little bit. And this is, I think, an okay position to start texturing, and whatever way around you want to do it, I think is fine, because I don't think neither can dictate neither, but I just like having lighting in place before I start texturing. One more thing I'm maybe going to do is just push this light back because I was getting a little bit hot there. And you know what I will do is I'll just kind of show you if we duplicate that light and push it into this direction, or in fact we go above the controller, to just kind of show you different looks. Maybe we do come over to the left here, behind the controller a little bit. There's different looks you can take here, whatever one suits you. Now you've got your light set up, do as you please with it. And if we wanted to add in a second camera here, and maybe change this to 150, holding 3 and right click, we can rotate here. And I'm maybe just going to bring this light back and up till that shadow. Press W to get back to the normal axis. And make sure that this shadow isn't coming too far up this handle. But yeah, I'm just going to leave the lighting like that now. I may go into it and make subtle tweaks, but I will declare that the lighting segment. And you can make a folder here and rename this cameras. And we're going to take a second camera and call it edit, third camera, sorry. And you can call the first one front. And we'll leave that one just... call it front too. And what we'll do with this camera is we will kind of just use this to maybe come to 50 millimeters, and we can just use this to whip around for when we're looking at textures in the viewport. And we can snap back to this to kind of see everything as a whole. And as we go through a texturing process, I will probably add different cameras. You hit that red dot to turn them off in the viewport. I'll probably hit different, create different cameras to create different angles and close-ups and different things that I'm texturing as we go, as that's generally how I tend to work. So if you see our reference board here, there's a good selection of textures that we can start with. We kind of have this, and it's useful to look at all the different lighting situations, because, for example, the difference in lighting between here and here is this one's really showing up the subtle kind of grip texture that's along the front, and this one's just having none of it. So I think, and neither is this this one either. So I think it's quite vital to kind of find your middle ground where you want to go, and we'll probably reuse some textures as well, I would say, because as soon as you kind of get a bit further in, you can do that. But what I think I'll do is start off with the kind of plastic glass type look on the outside of the buttons here, and then maybe we'll move into the analog sticks, or kind of create some generic materials that we can share across specific selection tags. Okay, so if we come up close here and we add in a specular material, we can just call this glass. We come into our node editor. What we're going to do is we're going to find, I'm going to clean this up a little bit, D-pad. Okay, cool. So under the buttons here, we have the selection tags to apply these. So see, it's my first selection tag on all of these. I'll probably rename them to glass, but in fact, I'll tell you what I'll do. Make this easier on you. I'm going to wipe the empty materials, and I'm going to rename all of these selections glass. I'm going to apply it like this, because this is probably similar to how you're applying it. And I don't want it to be that much different, because the other way I was applying it was very reminiscent of what I did, which was wiping the materials from the geometry I copied from the other scene, and you're not doing that because you're not making a tutorial. So what we'll do next is come back into our material now, and under the index, just change this to 1.52. That's generally what you want for glass. And in common, you want to check on fixed shadows, and that's going to get the light punching through it. And one thing that you would notice on the reference board is they weren't super reflective, and they were a little bit rough. So I'd maybe take your reflection and change this to about 0.5, and that's going to bring down your overall kind of glass look. And you can maybe put your roughness to 0.1 or 0.05 to give it more of that plastic look, and that's probably what we want to go with for that. And if we jump back to our front camera, you can kind of see the look there. And in our edit camera, you can see the caustics, which is being caused by the small light being at a high power at a nice distance, is going to give you those caustics, as well as just a well-modeled kind of piece of geometry suitable for glass materials. So those combinations together, and you should get this kind of effect. Okay, so what I think I will do next is the kind of front body here. Buttons. In our body, I've got this controller body. Again, I'm going to wipe those materials. I've got a bunch of selection tags, and I'm going to find the I'm going to call this one back. Kind of going to rename them as we go through here. That one's already renamed that one. We'll call this body black. So we'll create a new material, Octane glossy material. And we'll call this body black. And we are just going to drop that onto the selection. And we'll come into the material. And I'm going to use an RGB spectrum into the diffuse. And I'm going to make this maybe like a 4% black. And then we're going to come into our specular. Maybe do 0.5. Roughness. Well, we're not really going to worry about that. And I'll show you why. So if you come up close, you can see the material is looking okay just now. I'm going to grab an Octane noise. Hit these two buttons. And drag this into the bump. So you can see it looks all distorted and crazy right now. You can change the texture projection to box. And you can maybe bring up your roughness just a little bit more. And under your transform, make sure lock aspect ratio is ticked and just scale this down, 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 down. It's going to look like a texture now. It's going to look like pretty much the way you want it to. But you're just going to kind of keep pushing past till it's there, but not as noticeable. And then you can just hold in control, duplicate that, connect this up to the roughness. You could even delete that one's transform and texture projection and hook it up to the same ones. So now you have kind of a mask controller for both of them, but the only settings we're going to tweak are these settings. So in the first noise, the more we push up that, there's kind of going to be like a little area in the middle here inside this where the noise is going to be most prominent. If you bring it all the way down, it's not going to be there. And if you bring the gamma all the way up, it's not going to be there. So usually I like to go somewhere near to the top of the gamma. You can invert that and get a slightly different look if you want to. But I think doing that and then maybe bringing down your octaves and your omega or bringing them up. I think sometimes actually bringing them up on this kind of texture may look better. And then what we can do here on the roughness noise is just kind of the same thing. And what now that's going to do is kind of speak with this noise and give us a nice kind of gloss that is predicated on this detail and not just kind of in a float value. Instead it's kind of going to be doing a bit more intricate work to look cool. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. And I'm going to see how it looks at some different angles, because I think that's sometimes the best way to troubleshoot a texture is if you're not completely sure about it, just kind of give it some looks at different angles. And I'm definitely not happy with this right now. So again, I'm just going to make it smaller. And I'm going to bring up the gamma on the bump because I think there's too much of it right now. But I also think it's too spaced out. So I think there's too much of it, but there's also too much area in between each bump. So a way around that is to just kind of use the other end of the gamma. We can maybe turn off this invert now. But if we use the other end of the gamma, that wouldn't happen so much. I'm going to get more of that texture that I wanted. And we can maybe bring up our contrast a bit now. Because I think sometimes using the other end of the gamma is our contrast kind of gets hijacked a little bit, as it's already a bit too kind of sparsed out and stuff. And I'm just going to do the same here. I'm going to bring up the contrast again. And that's definitely a look I'm happy with at a distance. This looks very nice and very real. I think the only thing I don't like about this is it's a little bit too matte. I think I'm maybe pushing to a slightly deeper black. And I'm going to come down on the noise a little bit. And I'm going to come up on the gamma. Because I just kind of want this highlight around the edge of the ring here. And I'll maybe come down on the omega on the roughness. And I think if you come back to the front camera, that's kind of more the look I want, is this highlight around the kind of ring. So we'll leave that there for now. And we'll just kind of swiftly move into the analog sticks and stay on this area. So what I'm going to do next is create a kind of universal glossy material that I can apply to the logo here and the kind of interior bands of the analog sticks. So an easy way to do that is to just duplicate the material we have here. We can call this gloss. And if we find our analog stick texture tags here, so we can call this interior. We can call this, okay, so I don't have those totally separated, so we're just going to have to layer the materials, and I'm not going to spend time separating them. So in this second material, you can just kind of actually get rid of these for a second and bring down your roughness. And we're just going to apply those two tags. So you can apply 1 and we can apply 2. And then what we're going to do is get this to a place we like. So this is quite a glossy material. What I would suggest doing is maybe just putting the roughness noise in, scaling it up a little bit, bringing up your omega and octaves, and bringing up your gamma to get a pretty glossy look, or maybe your reflections are just a tiny little bit imperfect here. And then what we can do is duplicate the body black again and call it analog. And you're just going to apply this on top of the two. Or sorry, behind them. And that assures that your selection tag is still working. If this one updates, that would be nice. There we go. So what we want to do here, if you come back to our reference board here and you take a look at the kind of analog stick texture, and this also gives you a better look at the kind of bumps we're going to do here. And you can actually see on this kind of iteration, it does look very flat, but with what would be a noise covering just the kind of baseline roughness. So if that's a look you prefer to the kind of more bumpy one that we've just went for, kind of from this image, then you can do that. But what we're going to do now is concentrate on this. And I'm pretty sure you can imagine what we're going to do for that. And it's not going to take much tweaking to get here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of scale the noise up. Maybe not this much. And we can clear our roughness for a second. Maybe bring it up a little bit. Somewhere around 0.4. You can maybe bring up your specular a little bit too. In fact, that's something we could do in the body black. Just bring up that specular. And you could probably get away with going for a lower roughness. I didn't realize that was so low. Back here though in the analog, I would bring your gamma up a little bit, but I would bring up your octaves, and I would bring up your omega to get quite a lot of detail in there. You can maybe bring down the specular actually now, and maybe push quite a bit of contrast into that. And now we'll bring the roughness back in. We'll bring down the gamma. Again, this is just tweaking. I think maybe what I should do is play with more kind of controlled values so it's easier for you to follow along. I'll still play with the sliders, but then push them back to more solid values so you're not in any kind of state of chaos. So you can kind of see if you bring that gamma up too much, it just looks like some sort of weird displacement map. But I think somewhere around this is a nice medium. So I'm going 0.075, go 0.25, and go to 0.8 on that. And I think this is something good. Do Control S there, make sure it's saved. And we can maybe push into an even deeper black on those. Can maybe come up again on the specular. I think that's okay for these three. What I would do though is just find your kind of interior ring here, and we'll put the gloss material on that. And then if we come back to our front camera, you can kind of see things are shaping up now. It's beginning to look like a PlayStation 5 controller. Awesome. I didn't realize that was messed up, so I will fix that. Awesome. Okay, so we have the kind of body textured now. Before we move into adding the bump map to the white parts and doing the backplate, I'm just going to kind of work on the interior to the buttons, the triggers, and we'll top off this logo too. So for the logo just now, what you can do is if we just find that, we'll just drag that gloss material on there, and we'll do the same for that kind of outline bit. And then that's there, and we don't really have to think about it. I did actually change that to a metallic material later on, but we won't worry about that right now. What I'm going to texture next very quickly is the insides of the buttons. Now we do want our own material for that, so if we duplicate the gloss, we'll call this buttons, and that's mainly the reason we don't want to just share a material there, is because if you do decide to mess with your own colors of the controller or change the color later on, like I did when I changed it to black, you don't want to have to then separate everything. If it's separated now, it will save you all the time. So it's our third selection tag, so we're just going to start applying. Now, one thing you may notice about the kind of interior to the buttons is that they're not completely black. They're kind of grey, and they're definitely quite rough. So what we want to do is just come into our node editor, and we'll turn off that roughness. We won't really worry about any roughness or any noises or anything. We'll delete that out there. We'll bring up our roughness, and we'll bring up our RGB spectrum to a slightly lighter grey, maybe a bit more. Somewhere up here, I think, is a good representation of the way the buttons look. Okay, so now the buttons are done. I am going to do the triggers. So we'll do the triggers. So we're going to hit F2 and just drop out there and close up these. And in fact, no, I will come back to this edit camera. And I mentioned earlier on that we may create different cameras. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to branch off the edit one. I'm going to call this analog, because I kind of like this camera angle. It's a nice looking angle. So we'll come back to edit now. Now that that angle is preserved, maybe drop back our focal length to something more akin to editing. And we'll just focus on these triggers. Now, if you look at the reference board, you would see that we have glossier on the edge, and then that kind of similar analog material, but a little more plastic and less rubber on top. So if we see the triggers here, it's the left trigger. Delete our materials. We've got the glossy on the sides, so we can use this glossy material. And then what we can do is duplicate body black and put that underneath this material on each of them. And now you have the deviation. Now, the noise is a bit bigger and more visible on these. So what we want to do is come into the we'll call this trigger. And what we want to do is just kind of scale this up on the transform. So we can kind of see what's going on. You can see kind of the fidelity of everything a bit more there. In the bump noise, you may want to turn down the omega for this one, or turn up the octaves, but kind of meet the omega with it a little bit. Or in fact, I think turning it up maybe a better way to go. I think now what we need to do is concentrate on the roughness. So if we look at the contrast here, we want this more on the glossy side as opposed to the rough side of things. So yeah, something a bit more like this. And we're just going to play with the contrast there. And we make it even a bit bigger. Okay, yeah, so I think maybe 0.55 on the omega, 6 on the octaves. We'll do 0.45, we'll do 0.08. And I think that is a pretty good setting there. We can do 0.45 here. Oh, that's 0.55. And we can do 2 and 0.6. And I think that looks pretty reminiscent of how the triggers looked. Come back to a wider angle. You can see that looks quite good. Do Control S, save that. Have a look from the front. Looks good. And now what we can do is I will just apply a material to these kind of accents here. And I'll just do body black on those. And now everything's kind of coming together a little bit. Do Control S again. And we'll close up the triggers. And we'll move on to what will be kind of the final body textures before we do any cleanups and refinements. But we will take a look at applying the noise on the front grips, the back grips, and the touchpad here. And then I won't really go over what things I want to refine just yet, but it's just going to kind of revolve these logos here and maybe some camera angles too. Okay, so we're just going to finish up the texturing now. So we're going to dive into these white materials. So we can open up our node editor and just pop in a new material. We can call this white front. And we can apply this to our main kind of body segment here. So if you call this body front, and we drag this on there. And we'll come into our edit camera. Just come around the side, somewhere we can see this. Might just pop up our exposure a little bit for this angle. And this roughness here, that's too much. So I'm just going to come in here and turn this down to, I don't know, maybe 0.2. It's just a little bit too much for my liking, or even 0.1. Okay, so in our white material, shouldn't have closed in the node editor, going straight back in it. Just like usual, I'm dropping an Octane noise. I wouldn't really worry about the roughness here. Maybe add a modest amount, but we'll keep it under the float kind of value. If you need to access that easier, we can just keep it like that. Something like this. We're just going to concentrate on the bump. I don't think it's really worth going into the glossiness of this. We're not really going to be able to see it, and if we lean into it too much, you might just get unwanted fireflies. So if we make this box and we bring down the scale, tons and tons and tons. Yeah, so maybe do 0.01 on the scale. I'm going to pop it a bit closer on my camera. Can maybe come up to this angle. 1080p, or this is 720 actually. I haven't even changed the aspect ratio yet. What we're going to do is we're going to come up to the gamma, and we're going to come up to the side that I wasn't really going for before, and bring down the octaves and omega. I think you want a much more simplistic noise for this kind of grip. I can even push it a little bit further. And you know, it's really not going to take much work to achieve this look. If you look down at the bottom here, I think the reason we don't want that is it just adds a... I mean, we could stay down here and hit it with some contrast instead, but then it looks more like your grip is going inwards. So yeah, I think it's better to stay up here and kind of stay for that more spaced out look. So let's have a couple different takes on this and see how it looks. So at distance, it comes together. You don't want to look too closely at this. I mean, the up close look is maybe something you might want to go for, but it's extremely quick to achieve this result. So I think, you know, looking at these angles now, the whole kind of setup is coming together quite nicely. But what we will do is add a second white material. And what we're going to do in this white material is we're going to bring our bump way up. Now what we're going to apply to this, what we're going to apply this one to, is kind of these buttons and the insides of the main kind of buttons and arrows and stuff as well, because we don't actually have a texture on that yet. So if we look on the D-pad and you see this white bit here, isn't showing up, but if we apply the material to it, you see it gets a little bit brighter. So I'm just going to do that. Okay, so that's them applied. And you know, the reason we create a second material for that is because if you're at a close-up like this, and this actually happened to me on my first renders, I'm going to pop down the whole pixel here to about 0.7 just to clear up some of this noise. On my first renders, I was like looking at a camera angle like this, and I was seeing all this grip underneath the glass here, and I was like, oh, that doesn't look good. So it's just precautionary to take that extra step to make sure that doesn't happen. And I think you probably don't really need it on these buttons too. I haven't looked up close as to whether they do or not, but my best guess is that you probably wouldn't need it. So we can maybe set up a camera angle here. Now, call this buttons. Maybe do something super zoomed in. Come back out a bit. Get a nice angle like that. It's showing off all our different textures. And if it was quick for me to do it, I would unplug all the different noises and just leave the plain materials so you could see the kind of sheer quality that our textures are bringing us. Because at first sight, it can be like, wow, that's a really high fidelity render, but not understanding all the little detail that's hitting your eye when you're looking at it. So what we'll do now is we'll do this backplate, and I'll show you how I made that. So if we come up to the top here and create another separate white material, we call this white back, and we clear the noise and leave that float in there. We're adding a image texture. Now I will leave this texture on the reference board. Don't worry, I won't include this in the project files. I mean, it will be in there if you want it, but I'm not going to make you pay for this since it's such a integral part of this look and making sure your render looks good here. So don't worry about that, but it will be in there if you do want to purchase the files. So now what we can do is we'll just change that to box. But we'll come to our body, controller body, and we'll find this backplate here, and we'll apply it to it. And you can see now we've got these massive buttons. What we want to do is just scale them way down to something super, super small, way smaller than this. And you want to make sure this is, I selected the wrong one. I'll make sure I upload the right one, but I selected the wrong one. So we want the black with the white. It's easy enough to just invert it and get it the right way around. But I think the scale is okay. I think I may have made it a bit too small in my initial renders. I think this scale actually suits a little bit better if we come back to this buttons angle. Or in fact, we'll stay in the edit. We'll duplicate it though. And we have a look here around to the side. I think there's actually a bit too much shadow here, but if we maybe get a look from the top, change this to maybe 120. You can definitely see the difference, and it looks quite cool, especially with this bit. It may even be a bit bigger on the real controllers. It's definitely a bit thicker. But I wouldn't really overthink this part of it. Again, it's a excruciatingly small detail, and it's great to have it. So that's that. You can see our render from the front here. I actually want the background to be a bit more white. This is a little bit flat looking right now. A good way to do that is just, in most fronts, bring it closer to the geometry. Geometry being the controller. And we'll bring the light a bit closer. And maybe bring it around this side. In fact, we won't. So we want those caustics. So maybe bring it forward. So yeah, I just wanted the background to be a little bit whiter. You can always start playing with your exposure and camo if you get a bit lazy with it. It's always a quick get around, but I guess it's best to keep these things at their base values. So the last of the texturing we'll do before we do any cleanups is we'll add this LED in here to kind of finish it off, and we'll maybe sort out the logo and any things I think need fixed. And then what I'll do is just going to show you some directions. You could take this render, we'll do a couple takes on the black look as well, so you can switch between them. And I'll show you just some cool product angles that you can use this kind of for this kind of render. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that it was only in 1280p, so I'm just gonna or should I go square? I mean, I'll stay widescreen for now. So I'm just gonna put this to 1920 by 1080. So I'm just feeling a little bit blurry here, and I am on a 2K monitor, so it's just kind of good to get rid of that a little bit, and hopefully it'll help you kind of see things a little bit better. After all, the YouTube compression, I should have considered that a little bit earlier on. So what we're going to do now is create the LED material. So you can create a fuse for that. We can rename it LED, and just drop in a black body emission. And if we just find that texture, okay, so it's this one. Call this LED. We come to the edit camera, and we grab that selection. Just gonna see it's this very thin bar on the inside there. So if you've done your own model, or if you have a model that doesn't have one, so you can kind of see what's the best way to do that. You would think it goes all the way around, it doesn't. It's just these two little bars there, which I think is a really good approach for it. So we'll just hook up this black body emission, and we'll grab our RGB spectrum. So we'll drag that on there. You can see now we'll be coming at the sides. Now you're going to be noticing it's going to be really noisy. Now that's because with black bodies, they need to have the same sampling rate that your other black bodies do. So if we set the sampling rate of this main light to 248, come to black body emission, 248, and you're going to notice it's going to be resolving much quicker now. So there's an easy workaround for that. We're going to put an RGB spectrum into this here, and we're going to check surface brightness. We're maybe going to set the brightness to about 150. Now in the RGB spectrum, I kind of want to push somewhere around 210 on the H. We can just go 100% and 100%. And you're probably going to have to push or experiment with this a little bit to push kind of into the blue you want. Maybe 226 or something. I like a bit more. And black bodies can get a little bit difficult with blue sometimes, and they can lean into purple, but usually with enough samples and rendering time, they figure themselves out. And I kind of want the effect that I had on my original renders, which was I had the LEDs kind of blasting down here onto that curve. So you can just kind of pump up your power till you're getting that. And if you need to, just check off surface brightness. Make it go a little bit crazier. If you come into the front, we can get a look at this. You can just see how nuts this looks right now with all the kind of purple fireflies. So I'm going to kind of work around that by adding in a bit more of a white kind of hotspot to the light. And you're going to see what's that going to do is it's going to kind of stop trying to put so much saturation into the black body, and you're just going to kind of get a bit of a nicer look coming out of it. And then we can kind of move maybe back to that deeper blue, and hopefully the issue should be fixed. Now I'm going to see how surface brightness looks. It's looking a bit too weak, so I'm just going to keep it off and stay maybe around 150. But I am going to bring the sampling rate up to about 6,000, and I'm going to bring it up to about 6,000 here too. Just to give it a bit more clearance in the way that they kind of talk to each other. So now for kind of some things I want to clean up. I'm going to create a simple Octane metallic texture, and I'm just going to call this metal. And down on the logo, this material here, I'm just going to override that and keep this metallic material. And in the metallic material, I'm going to drop down our specular to like 0.4. Maybe bring up the roughness a little bit. Just keep dropping down the specular, really. It's an easy way to get a black metal. If not, just switch it to IOR plus color. But I like this because, well, you have control over it, and then we get this nice look here. And then I'm going to come into the edit camera. And under this bottom bit, this is like a plastic in real life. So I'm going to grab that selection, and I'm going to press space using middle mouse click. I'm going to expand on this, and holding control, I'm going to click, make it a bit bigger. Holding control, I'm going to click over the logo and deselect it. But I'm going to make sure only select visible elements is off. So I'll redo that so you can see. And get rid of it like that. So now we're left with this. And then I'm going to make sure we're not on any of the selection tags. I'm going to go select, set selection. And I'm guessing this is some kind of light. I'm just going to call it light. And then we can duplicate this. Or in fact, let's actually just try the glass material before we make a new one. So we try that on there. Yeah, let's make a new one. So we call this light. We apply that, and I'm just going to bring up the roughness quite a bit to maybe like 0.2. I think that looks cool. Now another thing is the Sony logo up the back here. I may be inclined to UV this on to the geometry. And there's also a little microphone sign, which can be seen on some of the controllers. So, you know, whether you want to UV those things on, I'm not going to do it here. But, so one more thing as well is we've kind of got this. I'm going to shift click that. Yes, it was under the body. We've got this charging port, which shouldn't be on the analog ring selection. So I'm gonna make this bigger. Just get rid of those with the same settings on the live selection we had before. Deselect any of them and set selection and call it charger. Call this charger too. And we'll just put the metal material on both of those. So that's that sorted out. And this is where we might want the surface brightness back, because at those angles, having that sort of beam is not always that nice. But you can always change it between the angles. So we come back to the front here. Everything's kind of in a place that I like now. So that's I would say that's all the texturing done. And at this point, I think you need to come back to your lighting and your cameras and setting up angles that you like and playing with them. And we'll create a separate take and kind of flick some of these to black as well. So we have both variations. So what we'll do is create a couple different cameras. So this camera was the top. Yeah, we can maybe zoom this out. I think this is a nice angle. Maybe bring it in a little bit. Call this top. Now an angle I did like is if you duplicate the front, really zoom in here to like a super telly. That looks cool alone, but I liked kind of doing like half the controller like this. Maybe come back a bit. I thought that was a super cool angle for the wide view. You like really just get, yeah, I think that looks really cool. Should call that front half. And there was this one other angle I really liked. Oh. If we come back here to like 80, you come out wide here and down and kind of look up at it. Maybe turn slightly. And you can see here we're like reaching the edge of that. Easy getaway. An easy get around, of course, is just make that much wider. And I think I'm actually going to push the light back a bit more to cover that. And I'm going to come back to that LED and definitely keep surface brightness on, because it just gets a little bit much, really. You can maybe just keep pumping up that power till you get to something that matches it, but without that nasty, just kind of overriding LED, because it doesn't look good like that. And I think, yeah, I would just bring this back closer again to make sure the light's kind of retaining itself. I just don't really like this taper off the darkness at the side. So what we'll do is we'll drop in a HDRI to fill that in. So I'm just going to call that one HDRI, call that one Sky. And I've dropped in a simple studio HDRI here. And we'll pop that above the sky. Oh. And you can see this is really adding to the scene a lot now. Should have done this at the beginning. So I couldn't actually remember if I used one or not. So you'd bring down the power quite a bit to maybe like 0.3 and give it some rotations. And yeah, so I definitely did do that, because I don't remember my shadows being as dark as they were. Because I had some angles kind of at the side and stuff here. So yeah, dropping in a HDRI is definitely what I did. And that really just gives you that puffy white that I really, really liked. So if you come back to this camera angle we're setting up, no, that's not too similar to this, is it? No, yeah, because I had a couple of those. So I just really wanted this to be like super wide out from the controller. And giving it quite a bit of breathing room on its own. I thought that would be really cool. So you call it front 3, and I'm going to duplicate that. And another angle I used was, in fact, just before we move on from it, maybe maybe zoom it in a bit, bring it back. Yeah. Yeah, that looks awesome. Love that. That looks so cool. That's gonna look so cool in the black. So if you just come back to that angle again, there was this really nice angle that I liked that I did, where I came in like this, and I just like looked at the side of the buttons. I thought that angle was awesome. It's kind of like this. Yeah, it was something like that. I thought it looked really cool. Again, just trying to avoid the dark areas. But yeah, it was something like this on the edge. Call it side buttons. And I mean, this is all just ideas. You may have some awesome ideas of things you want to do with it. And I think I had like some close-ups here, but I've already got a couple of those. I did a coupled. Usually in product renders, you'd want to do like a center over here. So in fact, we'll just do those. If we zero out all these rotations, we do like a center. You call this arrow cam. You can duplicate this. Call this button cam, and just like bring it over in the X parameter. And then you could duplicate it again and call it top. And if you take the P rotation, you just do like -90. We're not even in the camera yet. And you do 0 on the X, 0 on the Z, and then just climb up. Apparently we're really far away from the controller. Let's get back there. And then you probably want it the other way around, so switch that to 180. We got a super cool angle from above the controller. That looks really cool. I really like that one. So these were all angles I did. I haven't rendered out all of them yet, so I'll make sure I get them all rendered. It was a super cool angle as well. So I think I will leave that for the camera angles. Could always group these, call these front, and mark that red just so we know it's the edit camera. Now what we'll do is create a separate take and switch this to black, because that's going to be awesome. So if you come up here to your takes tab, make sure the project is saved. You just create 2 takes, double tap this button, call this first one white, and that's what we've been working in the whole time. I'm going to call this one black. We'll stay in this second take and we'll enable this auto take. Now what we can do is take all our white materials and we can just shove them all to black, and it will be that simple. So if we maybe go to like 6%, maybe a bit higher, and I'll bring down the roughness in a second on those. Contour white, 7. Yeah, that looks awesome. And then we take the back, go to like 6% again, and we'll go to that front 3. That looks awesome. So in this material, the white front, I want that a little bit more glossy for this one actually. So just bring down that roughness. Oh, that was diffuse. My bad. That whole time we had a diffuse on the front. That's crazy. I'll make sure to put a note in so you didn't do the same thing. Yeah, so that looks super cool. That looks awesome. Maybe just bring up that. I think actually what we could do now, because on the black we probably do want to play with the noise. Maybe bring that down and get some nice little sparkles going. That'll look awesome. Yeah, I love that. That just looks so cool. Oh, I love it. That looks awesome. Yeah. Can't go wrong. Can't go wrong. Or does it look a bit further? Yeah. Awesome. See how that looks from the front? Nice. That looks really cool. And you can see in our takes here, if we smack this, we're back to the white. But on the white front, I'm just going to make sure On the white, sorry. It's glossy. Don't want to make that same mistake. And glossy. Awesome. Let's see how those look. And we'll flick between these. Throw in a buffer. Come back. Front 3. So now we have the black and the white. That's super cool. Love that. I think I like the black much more. It's so strange. Like, I remember when the Xbox One came out and the PS4 came out, and I mean, I even remember when the 360 and the PS3 came out, and all I ever wanted for the 360 was a black controller because the default was white. And then the Xbox One came out, the default was black, all I wanted was a white controller. And then I got a PS4 and all I wanted was a white controller. And I haven't got a PS5 yet, but I'm pretty sure that all I want is a black controller. It's like you always want the one they don't make. It's super weird. But I think I'm going to conclude the tutorial there on the look at the black, because I think it looks super clean and super awesome. And the advantage of using that grey on the X as well as that on the buttons is we don't really have to change it. I think you could probably get away with changing this and then applying the grey that we used here onto those bits, so they're kind of white, because of course you can't really see them right now. So yeah, I think this looks super cool. I mean, we should maybe take a look at this on the black background. What material could I throw on there? Because we don't have a material in the background right now. I should put one on there to throw up the... Maybe that's why the background was feeling a bit weak at times, because if you don't put a material on, it's always going to see how it's just like brightened up a bit. It's always going to look a little bit darker than you'd want it to. Maybe, yeah. So I did all that stuff with the lights for nothing. I'll maybe try to put a note in for that too. But while we're on the black take, let's see how this looks. Oh yeah. I mean, sometimes your shadows can get a little bit weird looking when you they're like ever so slightly filled in. I sometimes kind of feel like, bring up the roughness and bring down the specular. Sometimes kind of feel like you want to go into a really, really, really deep black, to the point it's just like, I mean, even if we go to 0%, you're just kind of getting the controller in darkness. Sometimes it just looks a bit better, but this grey looks cool. That looks super cool. I think I like the grey on the white more though. Maybe you'd want to go black and white and then come into the white and do... we need to rename this again in this take. You would probably want to make new materials up in this take here in the main. Don't do what I'm doing because I'm doing it messy. But then do the white on the black like that. Yeah. Let's have it reversed. Looks super cool. Anyway, I will end the tutorial there. Thanks for sticking in there with this one. I know it was quite long and probably quite tedious in parts. A lot of just dragging textures on and messing with stuff. But I wanted you to kind of see my natural workflow a little bit. Kind of how I just work and create this render from scratch. And you've seen me take this model and turn it into something that you could use. I would say if you followed this and managed to get a very similar result, you are on the level of creating professional product renders. And if you can reapply that to different products and create yourself an appealing portfolio of work, you're going to be flooded with freelance work in no time, because you're going to be solving problems for people. And I'm going to try and touch on that more in future tutorials. But I would definitely suggest to just try and reapply this to different products, because kind of getting in the nitty gritty of things and just separating the textures and being simple with the lights is what's responsible for this here. This was there was no special sauce here. It was quite simple, and if you've stuck through the whole thing, then I congratulate you. You can rest now. Be sure to send me these renders. I'm excited to see how they look. play with it, have fun with it, do some cool animations. I could think of plenty of animations, so let me know if you'd like to see a tutorial on that. I might even do some myself for fun. I could come up with some cool... I recently did a project actually where I was messing around with the brand colors. I had 3 brand colors to work with, really playing with the brand colors and re-rendering the same shot in each. Well, I wasn't re-rendering it. I was just keying it in After Effects to save a bit of time with an object ID. But you could definitely do that to, use the same camera angle and have it flipping back and forth between the white and the black would be super cool. So maybe I'll do that for a bit of fun. Post that on my Instagram. But anyhow, thanks for watching. Check out the project files. Check out my other tutorials. Appreciate you staying till the end on this one. And I'll see you soon for another tutorial. Bye.